Hello everyone, welcome back to the Cozy Corner. My name is Lee, and this is my library. Grab a mug of something yummy and settle in for some talk of books. Today, I am talking about yet another challenge that I am completing in 2020 called the 12 Tropes of 2020 Challenge. I decided to do this one because even though I was really looking forward to doing the Read Everything on My Shelves challenge that I set for myself last year and renewed my commitment to just this past month, I wanted to do a fun booktube themed challenge, like one that was created for booktube, because I wanted to dive into the fun that you can have in curating titles and selecting which books you think best fit the challenge, and I just wanted to have fun completing something for booktube, if that makes sense. I am still really excited and incredibly passionate and driven to do my best to finish Everything on My Shelves challenge, but I still wanted to have fun playing around with titles and books. And I also can't quite kick the addiction of buying new books. It's a hard thing to beat. So the 12 Tropes of 2020 challenge is exactly what it sounds like. In 2020, these are the 12 most popular, 11, one is free choice, but on the whole, the 12 most popular tropes of the year, or slightly into 2019, I think, because that was when this challenge was first created. So if you don't know what a trope is, let me quickly explain it to you in layman's terms. Trope is basically a stereotypical plot theme that new stories are added on to. So you have like the framework that a trope creates, and the story is the house that's built around it, if that makes sense. One of the tropes I see most often is the Romeo and Juliet trope. Love Romeo and Juliet, love Shakespeare, but it's the trope that will most likely make me put it down and pick something else up because it's overdone. It is what it is. The trope is that two lovers from two different, usually warring families obviously fall in love and try to defy all odds in order to stay alive, and usually do their best to make both families get along with one another, and it all ends in tragedy, heartbreak, loss. Very rarely do I ever see a Romeo and Juliet plot that ends on a happy note. Romeo and Juliet is a tragedy. It doesn't end well. Here are a few examples. If you've ever seen the musical West Side Story, that is a Romeo and Juliet trope. The Jets and the Sharks, Puerto Rico and America, immigration and naturalization. It's two warring sides that don't end well. I won't spoil the end of West Side Story for you, but it's sad. Hatfields and McCoys, that's another good one. That one was a long one. It's really good, you should watch it, but it's that kind of trope. Two lovers from the warring families come together. So many people die. So a trope is basically just a plot structure that allows the author to tell a story with that kind of theme. So a lot of tropes are long-lasting like that, like Romeo and Juliet, Cinderella, ones that are based on fairy tales that have been around for a long time. But more often we now see tropes as sort of a pop culture movement. So for example, one of those pop culture tropes would be the vampire craze that happened like around 2008 and went on into the early 2010s. Twilight was a huge part of that. Vampire Diaries was a huge part of that. Vampire Academy. I can list so many other books. Another one would be the zombie apocalypse, or just apocalyptic writing in general. That was a huge trope. So a lot of it now has to do with pop culture and what people want to read. And most authors are pretty in tune to what people want to read. And I would say that's probably what happens to a lot of authors. They latch onto something that they know people will like and then put their own spin on it, which is fine. And a lot of good books come from that. I don't go actively looking for those kinds of books because I want to find the original, and I want to find the unique and the completely new revolutionary idea. That's what speaks to me more, and it's what drives me as a writer to find something new that no one else has done before. That being said, that was my brief little lecture on tropes. So there are 12 tropes in this challenge. 12 of them, the tropes were picked for me. I had a free choice for one of them, so I picked one that I believed was a very popular trope that I've been watching. This was a really fun challenge to put together because, like I said, it has been a while since I have dug deep into the book verse and monitored and paid attention to what was current and popular, and I had fun sifting through a bunch of titles. So, without further ado, let's get into it. The first book that is on the 12 Tropes challenge is the Cinder fella trope. And the book that I chose for this, I actually have already read. I talked about it in my What I Read in September video. It was the first book I read of this challenge. It is The Missing Butterfly by Derr. I'm not going to tell you too much about it. You should go watch my What I Read in September video to learn what I rated it and my thoughts on it. Suffice it to say, it was not good. I did not like it, and I'm really glad that I didn't end on that one, because that would have just been the worst way to end a challenge ever. I don't recommend it, but we checked it off the list. It's done. One trope is completed. I have seen this, maybe not necessarily as like the trope that's like the full premise of the story, but I've seen it as like a side story or with side characters as a secondary thing to the plot. So it was really interesting to dig through and find titles that where one of the main parts of the plot is the fact that these two people hate each other and then eventually fall in love. So the book I picked for that trope is The Wrath in the Dawn by Renee, Ahdieh. I have already read this one. This was the third book I read in September out of this challenge. Again, I talked about it in my What I Read in September video. Go watch that for my rating and my thoughts on it. This was really good. This was the first YA fantasy book I had read in a while, and it was a good one to get back into the swing of a genre that I know very well. I selected the title One to Watch by Kate Stayman-London. I am so excited to read this book. I think this is probably one of my top 3 out of this challenge that I'm most eager to read, because I have been waiting for a good plus-size heroine to show up on the scene. I know that this is a really popular book right now, and a lot of people on BookTube are reviewing it, which is why I've waited, with the exception of one BookTuber. I did watch her review. I have waited to read any reviews or see people talk about this book because, as I mentioned in other videos, I don't like watching people review it as they read it because I want to formulate my own opinions, so I usually wait for the hype to die down first. But I saw this one and I had to pick it up and read it because it's so good. So the main character's name in this book is Bee, and she is a plus-size woman who gets invited on the dating show Main Squeeze. She agrees to the show on one condition: that she will not fall in love. Her goal is to promote her career, to defy women's stereotypes and beauty standards, and to overall just promote love for plus-sized people. And perhaps a little obviously, there are suitors in there who capture her attention, and she maybe falls in love. The reviews of this were really, really good. It's already a national bestseller, and it's only out this year, so I'm really excited to read this because I have been waiting for a book like this to come along. So whether it's good or not, I'm eager to read it. This one I really wasn't all that familiar with, so I had fun researching what it means. And basically it's a character who is incredibly frosty and cold to the rest of the characters because they are usually hiding something mysterious or romantic, or something separates them from the characters, and it's all about the journey of finding out what's going on behind that cold exterior. And usually they're a little snooty. That's what I see most often. So the title I picked for this was Borage by Gill McKnight. This follows the story of a girl named Astral Projector, who is a witch, part of the Plague Tree Coven, and her coven has been having its money siphoned off by a magical creature, and there's also a dark force that is threatening to take over the coven. And so Astral Projector, along with some friends, discovers that the trail of discovering who had stolen her money leads to a place called Black and Blacker Finances, and the CEO, whose name is Abby Black, is the Ice Queen in this story. But the book is named after Borage, who is this black cat who is Astral's familiar or pet companion. Most witches have them. Anyway, Astral, while she's there, begins to discover that there's a whole bunch of betrayal and mystery around this company, and her journey to save her coven from the darkness that is threatening to take it over. and she falls in love along the way. So this one sounded really interesting. I finished Sabrina, the new season of Sabrina, on Netflix, so I'm needing more witch stuff. Again, I don't think this is a trope that's unique to 2020. Love triangles have been around forever. So I wanted to take this opportunity to, because it is a trope that's been around a while, not read a new release, but to go back and comb through my book wish list and pick one that I had always wanted to read but never got around to reading. And so I picked the selection by Kiera Cass. This has been, I think it came out when I was in high school, and I always wanted to read it, but I just never got around to it. So this story follows America Singer, who is one of 35 girls who are selected to compete for the heart of Prince Maxon. Now, I believe America has another lover, hence what makes it a love triangle, whose name is Aspen, that she's leaving behind, but he's secret because he's a caste below her, and so she has to hide him. And with Prince Maxon, she may have the chance to become powerful and, you know, have a relationship that she can share with people. And I think it's one of those things where she realizes that the life she dreamed of and left behind isn't what she actually wants. From the description, this reminds me quite a lot of The Princess Academy, with a little bit of maybe Divergent thrown in, of the competition and competing for, the competition of competing for a prince and for recognition. And it also kind of reminds me of Ali Condi's Matched. So I think it sounds like quite a few books put together. So I'm curious to see this one take on a love triangle, but also to see if it's different from those books or if it's just similar enough that I may not enjoy it. Who knows? I'm excited to see where this one goes. This was another one that I wasn't very familiar with. Basically, it's just two people getting married in order to rectify a situation, or because it's what's easiest, or it will mollify a lot of people. Typically, they're on opposite sides of an issue. So I decided to pick Serpent and Dove by Shelby. This one was another one that is quite popular right now. I've seen a lot of people rate it. I know there's at least one sequel, Blood and Honey, I think it's called. This follows the story of a witch and a witch hunter. Lou, I believe, is the witch, and she sounds like she's a scrapper from what I've heard. And then Reed is a witch hunter. And I think I haven't read too much about this book because, again, it's one of those that everyone is reading right now, and I wanted to create my own opinions on it, so I purposely haven't read too much about what's in here, just the gist. I believe that the city they live in is having quite a bit of internal conflict and wars and gang riots and that kind of thing, and so Lou and Reed are wed together in order to try to rectify some of the tension. Whether they will work through their marriage or whether they will betray each other, who knows. It sounded really good, and it sounds incredibly intense. I'm excited to learn more about the marriage of convenience story because I feel like that would be a really interesting thing to read more about and to watch from firsthand as these people struggle to like, let alone love each other. For whatever reason, that's really intriguing to me. So I'm really excited for this one. Love a good witch story. I'm interested to read about the witch hunting because I haven't read too much about actual witch hunting either. So yeah, I'm excited to enter this world, and I'm excited that there's a sequel because I have a feeling that I'm gonna really like this one and immediately want to read the sequel. So if that's the case, I'm really glad there's one available. I've heard of this one, never read anything about this kind of theme. So May December is a girl or a guy who is significantly younger than the girl or a guy that they are in a relationship with. Like I said, heard of it, never really read anything by it. And when I researched this one, most of the titles that I found were airplane romance novels, which aren't my favorite, or they just sounded like a cheap thrill to steal Sia's song title. I couldn't really find anything that was super, not necessarily wholesome, but impactful, which is what I was looking for with most of these. with the exception of the missing butterfly. That one took me completely by surprise. So I decided to pick the one that has been on my classics to read list for a while, and it is Memoirs of a Geisha by Arthur Golden. This follows a real-life account of what it was like to be a geisha, the transformation process that has to happen, why they're chosen so young, what they're made to do, and the trauma that can come from that, all told firsthand by Japan's most famous geisha. The blurb on the back says a novel that refuses to stay shut. So I'm excited to read this one. I think the printing in these pages is so interesting to look at. So I'm really excited to dive into this piece of history and learn more about this style of living. I'm really fascinated by historical fiction like this, and a lot of people have said that it reads kind of like a Dickensian romance, which love Charles Dickens. He's one of my faves. This one I think is probably the one that's going to be held to the highest standard because it is a classic, and I have been wanting to read it for a while, kind of like Count of Monte Cristo when I finished that in September. So I'm hoping that because it's been hyped up so much, it will live up to that standard. Again, not one that I think is strictly 2020. It's been around for a long time. We can go back all the way to very early French literature with Martin Guerre. Mistaken identity is everywhere. I mean, Pretty Little Liars. What a show. All about mistaken identity. Anyway, I decided to pick Above the Bay of Angels by Rhys Bowen. This book came out in 2019, I believe. I just finished this one, and I will do a more in-depth review in the What I Read in October video, but basically this story follows a girl named Isabella Waverley, and Isabella comes across a girl named Helen Barton who is dying in the street, and Helen's last wish is for Isabella to deliver a letter to Buckingham Palace which talks about her being hired as an undercook for Queen Victoria. And Isabella, whose family used to be titled, who have sort of fallen into depravity, and she had spent her whole life in servitude in order to support her drunk father and sister, younger sister, the sister wasn't drunk, but in order to support them, she became a servant and lived a life of servitude and discovered that she really liked cooking. And so when she got Helen's letter, and she walks to Buckingham Palace and realizes this girl who's dead has got this job, she decides to pose as Helen and take the job and remove herself from the previous life of servitude she had. She goes with Queen Victoria to Nice, the blackmail starts, there's a murder in it, she maybe falls in love, and there's a whole lot of description of delicious, good French cooking. Overall, this book was really good, and so I will, like I said, give you more information about it when I do my review and rating. People do find out who she is, but I'm not going to tell you how it happens, so this one was really good too. It didn't surprise me that this one was popular, given that Marvel is everybody's obsession, but I wanted to pick something that wasn't maybe like obviously superhero related, because I am a big fan of Marvel, but I don't really want to read it. I just want to keep it to the movies and the comic books. So I was looking for something out of the box, and that was when I discovered Forgetting Hephaestus, which is the Villain's Code Book 1, by Drew Hayes. This book is so hefty. I have The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss up here. That one's pretty hefty. This one is heavier than that. Basically, this story follows Tori Rivas, who is gifted with metahuman powers, but decides to use them to help her become sort of a Robin Hood and steal from people. And she attempts to steal from this villain's guild, and they obviously catch her and then recruit her. And so now she's facing competition from her other recruits, and evil from her teachers, and there are other superheroes to worry about, plus the pressure of maintaining a civilian cover. And it sounds really, really interesting, and the reviews I have read of this have been exceptional, and I'm really, really excited to read it because I think it's a look into how complicated the lines between being a hero and being a villain can be, and I think that's something that we don't often talk about. I also really love a backstory. I loved Wicked. I loved Heartless. I've talked about them before, that I love the backstory of a villain. I think the villains are probably sometimes my most favorite characters because they're so complex, but I wish we would spend more time talking about them. So I'm really excited to read this. Yeah, and to spend time in a new universe. I'm curious to know what Hephaestus has to do with it, because I love Greek mythology as well. So yeah, I'm really excited to read this one. This one I think is going to take a while because it's so huge. So I think this will be the one that takes me the most length of time just on girth alone. So anyway, I'm excited to add this title to my to-read list. To say that this entire trope is filled with romance novels, that's the biggest understatement of the year, of the century. That's pretty much all I could find were romance novels. I dug and dug and dug and couldn't find anything that wasn't romance related. So, I mean, even Perks of Being a Wallflower is romance related. I've already read it and watched the movie, so I didn't want to read that one again. I wanted new titles. But eventually I ended up going with Lisa Kleypas, Her Secrets of a Summer Night. This is the first book of the Wallflower series. To be fair, it was pretty good. I have read this one already. It was the second one I read in September. So again, go watch my What I Read in September to see the rating and the reviews of it. And it is what I like to call an airplane romance novel. Something Chandler Bing's mom would have been proud of. Not my cup of tea, but the storyline wasn't bad. And I actually am kind of interested to read the other 3 books that accompany this. The Wallflowers in this book are a group of girls who find themselves sitting alone in a ballroom and make a pact to help each other get husbands. And some of the other girls are really interesting and sort of charismatic characters that I want to see what happens to their stories. So maybe eventually I'll read the rest of them. But for now, it was a good book, but not my cup of tea. Again, a lot of romance. Who'da thunk it? I wanted to dig for one that was going to be out of the box. I did that for a few of these because I wanted to push myself in terms of the type of content I read, but also the style of writing I read. And the one that I decided to pick up, and the one that I am currently reading, is Ruby by Francesca Leah Block and Carmen Staten. This follows the story of a girl named Ruby, who is a Midwestern girl who grew up in an abusive family, and she discovers that she sort of has this sixth sense that helps her communicate with nature, but it also is able to help her know her own fate. And so she comes to discover that her soulmate, Orion, lives in Los Angeles and goes out to meet him and learns more about who she is and her abilities with nature. Sorry, I have a hair on my arm. Oh, I hate that feeling. It gives me goosebumps. Anyway, so far, I have really, really, really enjoyed it. It's incredibly intricate. I think these sections are so short, and it goes from flashbacks to her childhood and her dad who was abusive, and it also has sections like this that are in italics that I think are probably Orion. I haven't read ahead to figure it out, but I think that's probably who it's from. We don't know his name yet, and I think they're going to meet somewhere in the middle, so it sounds really, really interesting. I have never read anything by Francesca Leah Block before, but it's good so far, and the little blurbs on this book are really, really delicious. So it is a more grown-up book. I don't think kids would read this. I think this is probably an adult novel, but so far it's really good, and I'm excited to see what happens to Ruby and Orion. The last trope was a free choice, and I didn't want to just pick any book. I wanted to find a trope that I had noticed as being a more popular plot theme that people were using, and I decided upon memory loss, or stories having to do with like memory catchers or memories as currency, that kind of thing. I've been seeing a lot of that, and so I decided to pick up this book called Last Memoria by Rachel Emma Shaw. This one also came out in 2020. This book follows the story of a girl named Cyrilla who has the ability to steal memories, but she hates it. But she's commissioned by the king to do so in order to keep his subjects in line. And then she runs into Fallon, who is a boy who has, I think, like a 6-month gap in his memories, and he wants to get them back. And the guy that he's in love with, they're having conflicts, and he doesn't know why he's being so cagey. And so he, I think from what reads in this description, that he kidnaps Cirilla, or plans to use her in order to get his memories back, and doesn't really care why she doesn't want to do it, or the problems that come from giving memories back. And from the memory books that I flipped through, or were reading reviews of, this one I think sounded the most interesting because it is called a heartbreaking dark fantasy thriller about flawed people making flawed decisions. And I love when a book emphasizes that it's talking about people's humanity and how people are imperfect. But I also haven't read a dark fantasy thriller in a long time. It's been a hot minute, and I'm really excited to be moody. Also, look how gorgeous this cover is. Isn't that beautiful? Really excited to read this one as well. That's it. Those are the 12 tropes. I don't really have an order to reading these. When I put the challenge together, the challenge didn't specify that I was supposed to read them in any particular order, so I started reading them by when I got them delivered in the mail, because I ordered all of them, with the exception of The Wrath and the Dawn, which I used ILL. So that's why I read Missing Butterfly, Secrets of a Summer Night, and Wrath and the Dawn first, because they were the ones that were immediately available to me. And then I organized the rest of them like I did with the books on my shelf, alphabetical by author. So I think that's probably just how I'm going to continue to read them. I am on track. I am still on my first book for October, which I'm going to have to pick up the pace in order to get the next two done. But so far so good. I'm really enjoying it. I'm having fun reading quote-unquote stereotypical trope literature. I'm really pleased with how it's going so far, and there are some really good ones that are coming up. So I love introducing myself to new literature and styles of writing. I think overall it'll be an incredibly successful challenge. If you want to do this challenge yourself, I will leave a list of the tropes and my title selections for them in the description box. You by no means have to use the books that I chose. Pick your own if you want to. If you have read any of these books that I have picked for this challenge, please let me know in the comments. I would love to know what you thought of them. Or if you, like me, are interested in reading them, also let me know, and we can have a chat about how much we're looking forward to them. And finally, I wanted to give a huge thank you to Ellie's Appraisals, which is the book blog that I found this challenge at. She is the one who created this challenge, and she made cute little graphics for your social media that if you want to use them for each of the tropes, they're really cute. She also has a more in-depth explanation of what each of the tropes means and the titles that she selected for them. And she also, I think, has like a running blog update of her reviews of the books that she picked as she read them. It's really interesting. You should go read it. Her blog is really awesome. Anything at all to do with books, it's a great place to find inspiration to add things to your shelf. So thank you, Allie. I appreciate it. I will link her information down below if you want to go explore more about this challenge. That's it. Thank you for tuning in to another installment of Lee's Library. I hope that this challenge will inspire you to pick 12 new titles that maybe push you a little bit, get you out of your reading comfort zone. I love doing that. Only way to grow is to be uncomfortable. If you would, please like this video and subscribe to my channel. It really does help me out so that I know what you guys want to see. A huge thank you to the friends and family who have readily supported me in this journey. I can't wait to see what's on the next page. Cheers.